Advanced core stability is the topic of this tutorial. So what we're going to do to start with is talk about what core stability is. Then we're going to start talking about some exercises that are going to achieve it and the joints where we want it. So we're going to be looking at the shoulder, the spine and the hips, and we're going to try and bring those together so we can get that sort of whole body joint stability. So to start this off, we're talking about what is stability when it comes to exercise. Well, what we're looking at essentially is coordination and smoothness of movement. Now, when it comes to beginners to advanced, what we're looking at is going from, let's just say, single joint stability all the way up into multi-joint stability. So what we're trying to create is coordination, is smoothness of movement from, let's just say, a beginner's level through intermediate and up into advanced. So what we're going to do now is we're going to break down each joint. So we're going to look at the shoulder first, then we'll look at the spine, and then we'll look at the hip, and we'll talk about some ways of progressing from that beginner level up to that advanced level. Joint 1 is the shoulder. So what we're looking for is, again, moving from that single joint and then moving up into what will be more multi-joint. So I've got two exercises where we're going to demonstrate that. Now, when it comes to how long this will take and how long it progresses, that's down to an individual and their rate of progression and their rate of learning within exercise. But essentially, what we're looking at are some of the concepts and the principles that are going to give you that shoulder stability. So starting off from a very sort of, let's just call it beginner's level, what we're going to do is we're going to use this kettlebell. So we're going to come down and we're going to come into this position. Then what we're going to do is we're going to hold this up and we're going to hold this in place. Now what we want to do is pack the shoulder, so we sort of bring the shoulder back and down, get that in position, and then we're just going to hold. So this is basically the start of a Turkish get-up. Now this is the position that we're going to hold. Now what we're looking for, because it's just multi-joint, we want this arm to be completely still. If we've got instability in the shoulder, there's going to be a bit of wobbling moving around. Now this is only 8 kilos, it's, you know, I can cope with this, it's very easy, so that's not going to happen. But if this goes heavier, that might start happening. But essentially, we want this to happen and we want it to be nice and still. And I'll explain why in a second. If we then want to progress this exercise, we very simply turn this up on its end. And what you'll notice now is there's a little bit of movement in the arm because my shoulder, my elbow and my wrist are going about correcting. When it wants to go backwards, it goes about bringing it forwards. When it wants to drop to the left, it brings it back to the right, so on and so forth. So it's keeping that smooth and not jerky. So that would be going from, say, a beginner's level up into an intermediate's level. And again, we can add extra weight to this to progress it ever so slightly. But again, with regards to stability, weight isn't the end goal. Keeping that smooth is the end goal. And relax there. If we were to then take that up into a more advanced level, we're going to go for a slightly different type of exercise. That would be considered like an open loop because the weight's up there and it's moving around. What I'm going to do now is a closed loop. So we're going to go onto all fours and do sort of a kick through. So we're going to come up and through. Now this will require some degree of spine stability as well, but the main driver, and hip stability as well, but the main driver is the shoulder. So again, we're up, we lift, and we rotate through. Again, it's being coordinated. What you might find is when you sort of come up first, you're a little bit like, ugh, and then you come through. So it's not terribly well coordinated. The smoothness of movement isn't quite there, but as that gets refined, you can come up and you can go through the other way, like so. So that smoothness of movement is sort of showing us that we've got good smoothness of movement through the shoulder. Now, why is this? Well, what we're looking at with regards to stability is the smaller muscles, the rotator cuffs. Now, these muscles, if you can imagine a rocket going to the moon, you've got the main thrusters, which are creating the thrust to go upwards. That's your deltoid, that's your pecs, that's your lats. What we've then got are these little mini thrusters around the outside, which are just keeping it vertical. So all they're doing is just correcting. That's what your rotator cuffs do. When that's all wobbly and all over the place, the rotator cuffs aren't doing their job properly. They aren't keeping the arm vertical. Those little mini thrusters aren't keeping the rocket going straight up, vertical, up to the moon, or in the direction that it needs to go. So that's what we need to be focusing on with regards to shoulder stability. Now we move down the body slightly and we're going into the spine. So what we're trying to create now is spine stability. So we're trying to get the muscles around the spine, the smaller muscles around the spine, to fire at the right time so they hold the spine down onto the pelvis. So how we would do this at more of a beginner's level, come down onto all fours, very simply, we can go into this sort of position. We can keep a nice wide base, like so, and we can come into here. Again, what we're looking for is the shoulders and the hips are level, and we've got, again, that sort of coordinated, smooth movement going out. And all that's going to do, that's going to activate the spine muscles, the core muscles, and the muscles that are close into the spine to activate to hold the spine in place. Because what we don't want are the vertebrae that are sat on top of each other sort of moving ever so slightly because the muscles are mistiming. So again, it's not about the strength of the muscle, it's about the timing of the muscle, which is exactly what I was talking about with regards to the rotator cuff. Because if they time properly, that sort of wobbling motion is, in some respects, almost non-existent. There will probably always be a bit there because it's never static. But it's very smooth, it's very coordinated, and they're timing well. So it's a similar sort of thing that we want to do at the spine. So we would just use a very simple exercise, like the bird dog, and just holding there, keeping the hips level, keeping the shoulders level, for example. There will be small amounts of shoulder and hip stability going on as well in opposing joints, but essentially we're trying to get the muscles to time, bracing the abdominals, so on and so forth. What we would then do is move that up into, for example, a plank and then an arm raise. And then we would swap over and then we would go the other way. All this is doing is extending the lever. It's causing the abdominals to create more tension to hold the spine a little bit stiffer. If we start seeing shoulders and hips move, we know there's some instability there. So we need to get the shoulders smooth. So with the bird dog, we kept the shoulders level and the hips level. That's keeping the spine in place. That's creating helping the stability of the spine when we brace. It's exactly the same in the plank with the arm raise. As soon as we lift that arm, something wants to move to compensate. So we work against that and we keep the hips centered. When it comes to more advanced, we might go into a plank. We would then lift the arm up, then we can roll up into a side plank. So again, we've got that smoothness of movement through the shoulder. We've got a little bit of movement at the hip, but mainly we're just pivoting on the toes. We can then go the other way, again keeping the hips centered all the way through, down. So from a spine stability, we're still encouraging shoulder stability, we're still encouraging hip stability, but these two on the outside is what's helping this stay stable in the middle. With regards to just focusing on the spine, it's just the bracing of the abdominals and getting those muscles to time to hold the spine in place. Finally, we're talking about the stability of the hip. Now, we've got stability of the hip, we've also got stability of the ankle, which is going to be included in this, but the hip is going to be our main driver, and we'll sort of work through the ankle into the hip to get there. So again, from a beginner's level, just getting the stability of the hip and getting that timing properly. Half kneeling exercises are perfect. So coming down onto one knee. So we could just start there, have a relatively good base. That's going to be helpful as well. What we're looking for, again, is not a lot of movement at the hip. What you might find is some people, if I come right across onto here, you can start to see there's a little bit of a wobble. So again, I need my hips to start doing their job and stabilizing and holding me in place. Now what I could then do is add a weight into that, change my center of gravity by having a weight here and then moving it across here. So you can start to see muscles are starting to time, and I'm starting to wobble a little bit as my center of gravity changes. So this is the kind of thing that we would look at for beginners, just getting true hip stability built in. What we can then do when we come up to more intermediate type of levels, you can do this as beginners as well, but we still want that foundation from the half kneeling to be in place. What we would then do is come into some sort of, well, it could be single leg stance, or it could be just a static posture in this sort of single leg RDL into this sort of position. And again, we're just trying to keep, again, what we might find here is the knee is all over the place. Again, they may be very stable here, which is starting to show the hips nice and stable, but then as soon as we come up here, it's all over the place, which is now looking at the ankle. So we have to get the hip right first, then we can start to get the ankle right. So again, what we're looking for is the knee staying in position, and what keeps the knee in position is the hip and the ankle. So again, we're moving from that single joint into more multi-joint. So this would be our sort of intermediates type of level. What we would then do is add some movement on top of that, and we would go into what would be described as a hip aeroplane. So exactly the same position, we're still coming down into that sort of single leg RDL in this position, but what we're going to do now is we're going to rotate with it. So again, like I talked about before, we're going to change our centre of gravity. So we're going to come into this position. If I take my arms out, it'll be more obvious, but we're going to rotate up, again, whilst managing ankle and hip, which is essentially keeping the knee centred. So that's our focus, keep the knee centred, and then we could go all the way into internal rotation and all the way back out. So again, the whole time we're developing the muscle's ability to time, the smoothness of movement and the coordination of that movement. So those three things all the way through is what's going to develop our stability, and that's what's going to take us from beginner all the way up to advanced. If you want to develop your core strength and stability, and as we've talked about today, mainly stability, then if you click the link below, you'll go through to my core strength and stability workouts. And what you can do there, if you're a beginner, you've got a 12-week program to work through. If you're at intermediate and advanced levels, you've got workouts that you can work through. The 12-week program is a logical, systematized program over 12 weeks. When you get to intermediate and advanced levels, you don't have as much structure, but you are open to using the intermediate and advanced workouts. So if you want to go there, develop your core strength and stability from beginner to advanced, then click the link below.